Sandeep. Hope I'm audible.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You are.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
Okay.
you are audible. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sunil, and all other colleagues at School of Drama and Calicut University for inviting me to deliver a session in this uh, dynamic series of esteemed performers and performance pedagogues in the country. Uh, I'm actually the title of my today's presentation is Performance of the Invisible in Visual Arts. Maybe I can say that I can give a better title, a better poetic title, like Meditations on a Winged Being. The winged being is the artist, the so called artist. But how can we look at it in today's world? Look at the concept of art and artists in today's world, and what has performance to do with that? I think in the last sessions you have all had interesting sessions on, interesting debates on performance aspect of art practices of various kinds. And today, what I'm going to do is giving it, speaking about it in the from the context of contemporary art or visual art, the so-called as contemporary one. So I have video to not video. I have a PPT. Uh, Let me share that. Hope you can see my PPT.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you. Um, okay. To begin with, let me bring your attention to the fact that there are multitudes of spaces that is existing today for us to locate art and make art and be witness to art. Besides the so-called art galleries and museums, there are public spaces with installations, intervention spaces in the streets and communities, spaces and that anonymous artists find in the streets, the so-called graffiti, the real and fake spaces, both uh, you find created by the social media. Definitely, all are not simultaneously regarded as art with capital A, so-called art with capital A. But there are hierarchies in all spaces of art. But it is important to understand the layers of social expansions happened in the very idea of art, even when they find within the institutions with exclusive habits. Just before the onset of the COVID pandemic, we were all swimming in such ever expanding social spaces. We somehow had evolved into a society that can ask quote unquote artistic questions about not so not simply about works of art, but about our lives at large. Then what is the artistic question about the objects in general, about the art object, or about the very body we call, we carry as a continuous working machine? I would say that the artistic question is a question fundamentally performative and critical in nature. Art happens whenever bodies discover ways to escape the social forces that marks disciplined bodies. So institutional activities can only locate what is thus artistic. Institutions do not create art, we all know that, but they can locate what is quote unquote artistic. So let me explain using some examples. Let me discuss, first of all, um, a particular artist's work. Um, he's known as, he's Wolfgang Leib. Wolfgang Leib, his practice, he's a German conceptualist artist. He basically works with perishable organic materials, pollen, milk, wood, rice, etc. So, and also he works with durable ones, very durable, strong medium like granite, marble, brass, etc. Uh, he grounds his whole work by his choice of forms. Sometimes squares, sometimes the ancient Mesopotamian idea or form of ziggurats or ships, etc. He collects pollen from the wild flowers and bushes that grow in the fields near his home. This he has done each year over the course of 3 decades. The pollen Labe collects every summer distills the light and growth of the natural world. In opening up his jars of, he collects all pollen in jars, and he opens it and lays it in the gallery. Thus, he opens up the possibility of his viewers connecting to, like this, viewers connecting to, um, uh, a still, very quiet and much larger world. This is from his show. This particular image is from his show, Passageway Overgoing. So the museum actually gives an artist an expanse of space, and very abstract expanse of space. The pollen spread in a particular shape on the ground is seen as it is. But the concept that nature's order is the only place accorded for pollen, that is altered here. The natural stuff is coming to a gallery. The common sense goes that a museum is an artificial man-made space, and the wilderness out there is completely a natural space. This concept is toppled by this careful spread of the bright, gradient, glowing pollen within an abstract expanse of space given in the gallery. And pollen becomes a part of a museum space. So that is the kind of meditative practice that Labe carries out. The artist spreads the pollen meditatively on the gallery floor, and this is an act visible to us. But the artist here also performs an interesting merging of the invisible orders of control and discipline, so that the performance tries to challenge our understanding of nature and culture in binaries, as if they were about mutually exclusive spaces. They are not. They are very much inclusive spaces. And, when they include, the nature and culture is not a binary, but when the elements of nature and elements of culture get to go hand in hand and merge in a space, that sometimes create a lot of public debates on the artwork, because the public is challenged. But if you surf a few of the links about Labe, you can see a lot of critical comments on this artist's performance. Pollens are actually desired to be, destined to be depended by many insects and larvae for their sustenance. By plucking out the pollens from their natural space, this artist is disturbing the nature's order. People were criticizing. If you look at the performance from that perspective, then the meditative quality of the work may cease to exist. It may replace a sense of excessiveness and a useless act that this artist is doing. Some people could only correlate the radiant yellow of the pollen literally with Mark Rothko's painting. Mark Rothko, he is a color field abstractionist of high modernist, modern times of early 20th century. Then is it a literal translation of Mark Rothko's work? No. It involves so many invisible activities, very solitary activities of Labe, bringing it into a meditative practice. But all these will not be seen by a common public when they look at the whole final display of this work. Then that is simply a literal translation that may look simply like a yellow, nothing more than that. Then Labe's performance may look like an imitative act even. This happens because Leib was putting the invisible life of visual art into a visible dialogue. The invisible was our preconceptions, binary thinking, and the literality of our own looking practices. So this is one interesting instance I would show you to where one sees a performativity bringing out a dialogue and bringing out the invisible textures within a practice. Uh, Maybe we can go to the next idea, like body without organs. Every object has a physical existence, a body of its own. Body has organs. What are organs? We all look at organs as functional entities. We have fingers to touch, eyes to see, hands to catch hold of things. So like that, we deal with our body as if they are organs, a collection of organs, as if of a machine, a very useful one. We always expect the organs of our body to function properly because we need to work, we need to achieve our aims, to walk from this distance to that distance, etc. And function properly means in a measurably healthy way. Healthy means the body should exist, live, not die. When does an object become art then? When it loses the burden of functionality. Perhaps one may think I'm talking about the ideal condition of a contextless approach, the ideal Kantian situation of imagining an object that evokes disinterested pleasure. Instead, I intend a Deleuzian idea of bodies without organs, something that can deal with fleeting contexts in which bodies and minds do exist in ecstasy, playfulness, and experimentation. Today, somebody was explaining, when I was joining this session, somebody was explaining that performance art, the basic, crux of performance is the context. When performance is put into context, then that becomes an artistic space. So that's the same thing I'm also hinting at. Relevance of body without organs is that the bodies discover ways to escape the social forces that marks disciplined bodies. This actually liberates bodies from forces of discipline and seek alternative ways. Maybe I can show you one interesting example of how people look for alternative ways and how we locate human people's alternative ways. This is a child who plays and meets danger. Let me show you this photograph. This is a child in his play. On a fine, silent afternoon, he was in search of precisely nothing. Found a lot of bits and pieces of terracotta tiles around around his house, and he simply enjoyed placing one on top of the other. When the tiles did not fall, in spite of placing more tiles on one on top of the other, he slowly turned ambitious. He feared that there will be a fall soon, but he wanted to stretch his limit. If he can place one more tile, that was great achievement. So he was ambitious. He slowly turned ambitious. He tested not only himself, but some strange principle of force that actually sustained this vertical journey of terracotta tiles on top of that. The principle of which he never actually knew, but he sensed. Because he is not he was at that age, maybe at that time he was only a 4th standard student. On one stage, his face looked awestruck. The body turned quite performative. Sorry, did I break? Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. We can hear you.
Yes. Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
So now what happened is he tested himself, but not only that, he was thinking of, he sensed some strange principle that helps him to get up and up. So on the stage, on one stage, his face looked really difficult. It was quite performative. And that moment, I clicked this photograph. Each time he was trying another piece of tile, he was overcoming the fear within, the fear of a fall. Maybe you will remember the British artist Andy Goldsworthy when I show this to you. This is Andy Goldsworthy. Uh, actually, he does interesting site-specific works and land art experiments. He is known for ephemeral works created outdoors from natural materials found there on site. He viewed his artistic process as a collaboration with nature. So there he was uncovering the essence of his materials and determining what they were capable of. Like, this is a work using twigs. This is a work using so many different colors of leaves. These are all quite ephemeral, and they were, after this photograph, maybe taking this photograph, maybe that is a still waters. If a wind blows, the whole thing will go. So his process actually required a lot of patience and flexibility. When sculpting with, he was even sculpting with ice like this. He was sculpting with ice. For example, he would have to wait for the temperature to draw low enough. His work called Rain Shadows. I'll show you Rain Shadows. This is Rain Shadows work. And that involved lying down on the ground just before a rainfall and remaining in that same spot until the rain stopped. Thereby, he could create a shadow in the shape of his body, which then he photographed. So the artist, quote unquote artist, in such instances, is not an absolute and complete maker of an object, but he is the one who trips along a lot of collective consciousness and opens a hypothetical situation that can create quite a transient moment and spaces. So so what I mean is, an artist is one who creates a hypothetical situation. And especially when one trips along such collective consciousness, like in the earlier example, it is a consciousness about, it is the habit of our thinking in terms of binaries, body, mind, man, woman, such binaries, very normal they would look like, but that is what makes life so tough by making it so exclusive. It doesn't give you any chance to meditate on a kind of connectivity, merging. Such acts become very difficult, and that is why an artist will take it over. And if you want to call such a libertine body by a name, maybe it is very difficult. One may say it is a winged being. I'll get back to that winged being. In the beginning, I put that image in the beginning. Yes, meditations on body. That is why I said this meditations on a winged being. So let me get back to where I reached. Yeah. When the body, now what I'm going to explain is, so far I said about a hypothetical situation where, a body without organ functions within or creates a hypothetical situation. Now I'm going to tell you about body with disoriented organs. If you, when this body or the body of an object becomes an art, it loses its functional organs. That's what we saw earlier. And instead, there joins the experiential parts of speech. So body has a lot of experiential parts of speech. That creates an experimental situation I told earlier. So now let me consider how this happens in a painting. Now, earlier two examples were, one was a land art experiment, and first one was also another kind of institutional space, but an art within an institutional space, but it was coming from outside, a kind of life. It has lots of invisible layers of an artist's life outside, or maybe he was making it an in and out process. He was connecting an in and out process. Now I'm going to tell you about a painter. This is a slightly longer version because, the painter is very interesting. In a painting, this situation, hypothetical situation or experimental situation, could be literally illustrated. So, like in the whole over of Surendra Nair's paintings, that I'm going to discuss now with you in some detail. I'll show you one. Yeah. This is one quite early paintings, the painting of Surendra Nair. The artist is here more singularly present in such an instance of painting. He might look like an absolute and complete maker of the object that is painting. Because he lives and works in Baroda in a studio as an singular artist. He is almost leading a very recluse life, and the painting but remembers and literally depicts a winged being, as I showed you earlier, with whom the painter, his time, his country, his people, everything merges. The winged being is here, the one who trips along a collective consciousness again and opens a hypothetical situation. Lots of, invisible people, hitherto invisible people, physical and non-physical stuff join into this pictorial realm. And that is the way a contemporary space, art space opens an inbuilt space for performances. So when we look at the pretty theatric paintings of Surendra Nair, that is a feast in itself. If you just Google for his works, it is plenty there available in Google. The artistic question here is based on a largely invisible experiential life of a performer body, the body of art, the body of any being in an identified situation. That's what I feel. So let me talk about the pathological body he created. I mentioned that organs are the sites of social control. Organs are all organs are sites of social control. So what happens when a pathological body escapes its organs? By a certain kind of theatrical indulgence of the self. Actually, what happens is the continuous streams of collective imagination that we all have is swiftly associated with the frameworks of religion, morals, and an essential sense of nationhood for the 20th century person. Actually, they project this kind of continuous imagination. They project some integral parts of speech, vision, and body. The Lord Sri Rama, the muscular body of Sri Rama, that comes from the imagination, collective consciousness of such a body from very long back, frameworks. Frameworks understood as faith, devotion, spirituality. These streams are handed over as objects, materials, fables, rituals, Puranas, ethics, related everyday practices. So the tentative presence of such expressions in the public domain today generates debates among us. Sections of modernist societies look at the increase of religious evocations in public domain as a possible threat to the secular harmony of the state. We all do that. We all are scared of this, losing of secular harmony. Let me get your attention to a secular anxiety in the article written by Dr. K.N. Panikkar long back in 2009. Religion in the public sphere. It was it appeared in Hindu in 2009. He observes that the Renaissance, Enlightenment, and scientific revolution being earlier, being borrowed or weak, whatever we have bought is weak, the capacity of modernization in India to impact on secularization and marginalization of religion is itself not pronounced. This is the observation he makes. This is true. Instead, religion remains a powerful force in civil society today. This is against all our secular wish. Also, the use of religion for political ends has substantially increased. So such a development has serious implication for a secular state and society. We all know that. Retrieving the secular character for the public sphere is therefore an imperative. Otherwise, its religious character is likely to impinge. So this is a general condition we are accustomed to. This secular anxiety emerges in the context of some others inflating them for making racial, caste-wise majoritarian regimes, where human body and its self-image will be politically sorted, surveyed, administered, and manipulated for its link with an imaginative present that can so effectively twist the panel. All our banal life will be twisted into sacred and political and whatnot. So much so that these integral parts of speech protrude only absurdly in a modernity's any skin-saving game. So this absurd pain reflected in some Malayali painters of 1980s and 90s. And in some other painters also, but when it happens among the Malayali, people, that is another kind of particularity. That's why I'm showing Surendran Nair in a different way. Surendran was one among them. Sometimes parts of speech appear as an extra organ on the palm. They open pores on the body with windows, swords, and eggs. A kind of pathological body image then speak by a collective self that uses elements of what Ashish Nandi calls unhistoricized past, a kind of life-defining, as a life-defining force. An unhistoricized past will be a very life-defining force. That kind of a situation it is brought into. Now, what matters in the art world, because what we are talking about is about a painting. An artist. Can exclusive habits of the art world contain such a self for some entirely different reasons? Our political public domain take this self more categorically as a communal one. And such pathological bodies as communal bodies. Bodies that really take over the wounds, the people who are getting affected. All these people are known in a package of communal people. And we debate around threats caused by it. But this discussion demands much larger space in this session. We don't have time for this. Let me get into this particular painter's issue. For the moment, I think certain content of individualism in the discourse of art is perhaps crucial in the making of an artist like Surendran Nair in Indian art scene over the past 2 decades. Contemporary painters' parts of speech in life is almost a similar act in consciousness as that exerted by spirited practices of piercing, or shedding all coverings, devoting, dancing, decorating, mesmerizing, like oracles do, mounting, like we mount our flags, we get on top of the hills, we take lots of sacrifices, all in search of God, all to reach up to the God that we devote. Bleeding, we bleed, we heat, we wet in exuberance. All those things one struggle to hide to become modern. That is the interesting part. That's what affects me when I look at Surendran's early sketches of these pathological bodies, and even later. Surendran Nair's works are color-rich and they are calculated dream dialogues. They project a metacritic of this communal subject's strategies, which I explained earlier. Nair's iconic specters actually catch the cosmic man. I showed you the example in the example earlier. Like this, a very cosmic man, a huge one. Um, and but this cosmic man is in syndrome. It is also a difficult trickster act that breaks in. Just as unconscious does, it trips into a rational situation. That's why you can find this man just looking like us, having a headphone on his head. And also he is tied by so many wires, and it is tied to his body, his animal body. Tricksters phenomena, I mean, that contains similar features in several societies. This fact actually leads us to examine comparative social functions, psychological mechanisms, lots of literary traces, relationships to religious systems, and ritualistic transformations. So in a way, Nayar's is at once discontinuous and continuous game of rationalization. It is discontinuous in the sense that Surendran Nayar is a contemporary subject who largely performs those metaphors and mythic ritualistic experience that were skipped, localized, and submerged by a considerable span of modern era. But it is also continuous in the sense that critical reasoning habit of modernity is still employed as a painter, just like any modern subject, to surpass possible mystifications of his personal mythologies. So even if Surendran Nair works with lots of personal overtones, they are not mystified. It is not a single person's mystified or private affairs. It becomes little more, expanded into a collective consciousness. So this artist is apparently a carrier of variegated collective dreams of East and West, tradition and modernity, dreams encrypted with manipulators, the political realities of homogenizing all individual imaginative variants. This is what lies in his painting's title, The Bad Behavior of Singularities. So let me get into one of his paintings and let me try to explain. This is a painting, Vertigo, The Bad Behavior of Singularities, a Kukuno Bunopolis series. It was done in 2004-5. So what is being shown is a standing erect, the man, but a bird, rather a swan or the man. A visible part of a man is erect by torso, and lower abdomen is a standstill swan. Perhaps a crane being. You can even say it is a crane being for its pretty long limb. And naming of these elements seems actually immaterial, but that creature is scooping in the blue cloudlets, air in which man erects. But the soil-colored beak, a kind of soil-colored ochre beak of the swan, what a pride of existence. See, here, I mean, I've shown a little, another example of the same similar image here. The swan's only leg is in the dark red lotus. You can see it in that painting, dark red lotus. And but the leg is so tall as if it is an extended pillar, but something of a stick too, kind of a stick, the slender stick. But look down, it comes from a pillar post of a deserted city with slender cypress on rows and a viridian meadows in squares. So much in order. Everything is in order. And those little tomb houses you have seen, the saffron alleys and pathways, the clouds rip apart. My effort perhaps slips into something like a script written after an abrupt pictorial enactment. After the pictorial enactment is over, I'm making a script of this painting. Or is it that the painting in reference at once looks like a flat endorsement of some previous familiar scripts, the painting brings to mind those imperial pillars in designed city plans and the capital. What about the ruminating swan self, erect over a symbolic lotus? Reading the painting does not necessarily yield a simple script of composite existence. I know that. So, as it is in that terianthropomorphic image that you can see, here it is actually a twisting drama of the self and animal that consciously relocates presupposed metonymic harmonies in the memory of civilizations. These are often enforced as historical, but leading to a lot of hysteria. Here, self is a plea for clarity and culture, while animal is a plea for mystery and loss of culture. National and religious symbols are reallocated into a drama of a painter man, scripting in person some collective metaphors. Notably, this happens in the pretext of the exclusivist notions of religious fundamentalism in India, taking greater strides in 1990s, demarcating a majority religion with uninterrupted lineage from the time of Vedas. Interestingly, reappearance of such therianthropomorphic gods like Ganesha in 20th century into the Brahminical pantheon, this reappearance of such gods into the Brahminical pantheon interfaces with the reversal of the progressive thought. K. Krishnamurti, in his book called Mythical Animals in Indian Art, says it is possibly due to the period when elephant-headed god made his first entry into Brahminical pantheon, a period when Tantrism was exerting its influence over almost all regions of India and reversed the trend of progressive thought. So thereby, that includes many gods and goddesses to reappear in their therianthropomorphic forms. That Ganesha, who was in that form, was immediately absorbed into a new cult and could not at any time shun his animal mask. Surendra Nair's projection of apparently therianthropomorphic iconography also fell upon a reverse situation of Indian history. That is a point I want to make. And on a general note, one can see that animals existed in man's creative punches as politically encoded fables and sculptural reliefs and paintings. Perhaps every eagle and swan and bat may be the man and woman and bird of all men and women, birds and writing. So all these are connected. Every eagle and swan and bat may be the man, woman, bird and word of all men, women, birds and writing. So this is the sentence I got from a very interesting book on animal philosophy. Decoding them never allowed for any one-to-one corresponding knowledge of it. As I said earlier, literal reading of any artwork will misguide us because visible is not there to read, invisible is there to read. So it made a feeling of enormity, actually decoding, this imagery, animal, human combination, composite imagery, that gives a feeling of enormity at disparate instances, cutting the codes of it. So a painting that writes parts of animals or objects into human body, human parts, may tempt us for reading it with some familiar symbolism. But any reading by all means has to remain discreet. So appropriating animals or objects in a combination attitude, artist man-self, on one hand, hints at a political contingency. That's what, that is a point I want to make. Actually, there is a huge, genealogy of the morals and the morale to speak about here. Folk consciousness, folk conscience often employed animals to convey human meanings. Animality, understood differently in different periods, is a state of turbulent emotion. It is there in genealogy of morals, like this. Um, if we consider that even the highest human being was only, even the highest human being has only become more elevated and subtle in nature of his good and in his conception of what is inimical to him. It is not improper to describe the entire phenomenon of morality as animal, Nietzsche says. Nietzsche refers a situation that sea animals faced when they were compelled to become land animals or perish. If they want to survive, they have to be land animals or otherwise you perish. It was the same as that which was faced by semi-animals who were well adapted to wilderness, to war, to prowling, to adventure. Suddenly all their instincts were disvalued and suspended. Perhaps that happens with a modern Indian man and modern Indian artist, a semi-animal of tradition and modernity. Somewhere in the beginning of 90s, some Indian artists had started feeling something of an existential pang, like this: exist or die. Exist by joining the bandwagon of globalization, or die. So this is how, like from now on, this creed has to walk on in its feet and bear itself, whereas hitherto it had been borne by the outsider waters, be it Western art, be it Eurocentrism, or whatever. A dreadful heaviness lay upon. So perhaps this is like that is further weighed upon in 2000s, in the new millennium, demanding transcendence upon the return of the canons and real capitals, heavily, realigning the symbolic ones in contemporary art of globalization, wherein Surendra Nair came to enjoy some pride of space. Possibly that is why in Nair's personal mythology of existence, he problematizes Icarus and Narcissus. I'll show you one interesting example. The Western mythic idioms, these are Western mythic idioms of ego, Icarus and Narcissus. Not all who would be are Narcissus. Here is an excerpt from the foreword by Cheney's, by Sartre. It's a foreword by Sartre for Cheney's Thieves' Journal of 1954. Let me read it out in its order. Many who lean over the water see only vague human figure. But if somebody sees himself everywhere, even in others, he perceives himself, whereby bringing to light their deepest secrets. The disturbing theme of the double, the image, the counterpart, the enemy brother is found in all his works. This is from the Thief's Journal. So there is, what I'm going to now tell you is, there are some limits to remember, and there are some uses of mysteries that an artist employs in his life to emerge as a performative being. Nair was 2 years old when he lost his father. He saw father's dead body from the side, and the difference between dead and live body of father seemed beyond the scope of any technique of representation. So yet father is a system of social nourishment, and memoirs of others could really excitingly solicit. So when one listens to Surendran speaking of his elder cousin, he was a Malayalam teacher, and his friends who were hardcore film buffs, indulging in heated arguments, walking long distances through the paddy fields. One is evoked to a real rich texture of young men's real fantasies of a particular location and time. That is the first generation of post-independent youth of the regionalized context of Kerala, walking along luxuriously nourishing landscape, the green one, intrigued by self and society in their films and literature. Nair, just after his 10th standard, came across a short story, Ashwathama Vindachiri, by Kakanadan, a modernist Malayalam writer, He was suddenly intrigued at the abstract mystery of the story and its diction. But to keep the mystery intact, he didn't read it again for a long time. Art in his teenage ambience was another different kind of inaccessibility or mysterious mantle that was for long stuck upon some idea of Ravi Verma also. Because he was also, the legends about Ravi Verma say that it was really painstakingly he was getting some knowledge from others. The same story lingers on an artist or on a young man, a young aspirant of art in 90s, in 80s also, 1980s also. It is a century-long story. So doing a pre-degree course, he found in the college library a small book of European Renaissance drawing. He tried to copy two drawings, self-portraits of Da Vinci and Bruegel. During that time, Picasso passes away, 1976, I think. And an elaborate article comes up in magazine. So by 75, Surendra Nair joins College of Fine Arts, Trivandrum. That had then just started giving degree course in fine arts. So there were desperate attempts to touch upon the experience that can be called quote unquote art and its takes on in life. Persons and events at various corners levered into art experience of sorts. So some partially successful attempts to access the mystery of art out there, out in West, out in North India, or out in some faraway places, faraway academic institutions, etc., etc. Art becomes an aspect of utopia then. In effect, that projected the limits of representation and reality. So accessing art education in a transitional stage of a regional art institution started breaking these out there mysteries of modern art. But fatal bureaucratic obstacles only increased the desire for access further in a different direction, in the mode of an art student activism that led hunger strikes and street campaigns through poster making. So the whole story is not only of Surendra Nair. What I'm telling you is a story of a radical art activism that happened in this part of the world. So on a personal level, so long as there is no image of father, Surendra Nair went on imagining the progenitor in the poetry of rituals. He performed the annual Shraddha, the kind of homage ceremony, to maintain a connection across worlds with the spirits of one's ancestors till he was 25 years old. And almost poetic way, he then thought to come to terms with reality through the stylized articulations of mystery and distance, being encoded in a language working in the rituals at many intimate levels, weaving the visual, verbal, and beautiful object world that can continuously alter meanings with space and time. During art student days, he produced sketchbooks of many viscous figures. I'll show you those, some of those. Oh, sorry, not this. Wait. Oh, sorry, I don't have that image. I forgot to carry that image here. His old sketchbook image that shows a loner daydreamer. You know, it was filled with lots of romance, Beckmanian style. His works looked quite different from those sturdy, progressive, powerful drawings of progressive friends he had, radical friends he had. But he was working almost in a Beckmanian style still, and a sense of literality and difficult local, taste remained in his sketchbooks. When many of his fellow artists settled on to some lingua franca of the narrative practices in Baroda, or the modern or the expressionist take or the abstract, Surendra Nair remained with his fluid references. He was not settling anywhere with any style of art. So it is difficult to approach this artist through any shifting paradigms of modern Indian art scene. Perhaps he may belong to the unconsolidated generation of romantic fantasy masters with regional upbringing. Speciality of fantasy masters, be it a temple oracle or a modern painter or deserted housewife, or any such, is that they hardly hide the experience of spirit, experience of caste, experience of sexuality. So that is a speciality of fantasy masters. They don't hide. Their invisibility is very easily brought into visibility. Because they don't have the purposes of an assumed urban subjectivity that is generally forced on to veer in very Puritan, exclusive, existential, othering paradigms, where you have seen lots of existential paintings of people in 60s, 70s, and all. Say many avant-garde identity. Here you don't find this avant-garde identity, cutting edge identities. But here you find more of a, many invisible undercurrents are brought forth, springing up. So let me tell you, let me give you an excerpt from my conversation with this artist. He was saying, literariness was a reason for criticism when I was studying. But raised around me were issues altogether different sort of. Though for some time I tried abandoning my literariness, later I understood that one should resolve one's issues rather genuinely through the situations. People came and went in my surroundings, all had many kinds of stories to tell. There was this distant relative who used to come home in my childhood. She used to tell me stories with classical tinge. There was another woman telling stories of animals. Somebody came as security guard for the rice grains harvested from our paddy fields, and he used to tell very darker stories. This is what he told in a conversation. Perhaps in pursuit of genuine interactions with faithful to his premises, Surendran remained an interesting Nair, getting displaced from the feudal and also from the modern. He has been making collective biographic pictures of both these categories, like feudal categories and the modern categories, with an alternate visionary zeal of an outsider. The Nair went outside of his space and looked back at him. The caste identity went out of it and looked back at it, thereby perhaps making space for a third political being. The problematic of communal subjectivity. Titles to the pictures, interestingly, became too lengthy and vivid for them, yet remained as crisp as annotative phrases. One title is like this: Doctrine of the Forest, an actor at play. So like that, lots of such titlings are very interesting from Surendran Nair. So let's see what are these. He is like, for quite some time he is in the making of a system of a double, the discrete twins, through some sort of third-party monologues. What is this third-party monologues? I told you, he was getting out of his caste frameworks, his regional frameworks, and looking back at it. His own communal subjectivity is something that he breaks out and looking back at it and giving us very interesting visionary performances. So let me explain what these crossbred monologues are. Nair may have arrived at a wonderfully flat, delicate, and very razor-finished language of painting. Beautiful razor-finished language he uses, and rich colors. But more importantly, he started a multiple-oriented art world viewers by evocations of a kind of ethnographically scripted subjects. Take, for example, this work. This one. Please ignore the earlier example I showed you. I forgot to cancel that image. Okay. This is an example from some of his actor at play set. Actor at play. Self-conscious and imaginary alignment with a masked and witty dance performer.
Masha.
Hello? Hello? I mean,
Please
anybody
continue,
else?
ma'am.
Okay, okay. Okay, I thought somebody was asking something. Okay. Um, so, any performance can have a wide range of imaginative alignments. Manodharma, we say. It can even take up an inactive ego for its display. Like in this painting, Kutha is a mono act with its home in Kerala. I'm telling you the details for those coming outside of the state. It is the traditional equivalent of a stand-up comic act. Performer has a wider leeway in that he can even heckle the audience. The docile, the other image of the soaring ego, has its own drama. The docile has its own drama. Alasanum avanda nadagamundu. Docile is the dominated yet easily adapted self. What is the quality of a docile being, of a lazy being? Lazy is not the word. Docile is the word. Passive word. The person. Docile is could be dominated, but the docile is the one who can easily adapt and haunts a proverbial state of being. That proverbial state of being you can see in this work and also in this work. I'll explain, I'll come to this work later. Let me finish off this one. So this work is known as Regarding Roots, Study for a Solemn Free Radical Act, an actor performing in an imaginary play. This is from the title Epiphany, Kukunobonopolis series. That is why I said a long titling. Docile is an in-between stage, like a middle class or a middle caste in the social ladder, like Nayars, for example, between the Brahmins and the untouchables. Between this is an in-between stage. For example, the people who were caretakers and guardians, who largely preserved, mimicked, and intimately associated with the Brahminical orders. The Chakyar Kooth is more stylized form, and Tullal in more vernacular, flexible form gave ample scope for improvisation of the situations of the actor at play. Some verse narrations written by Kunjan Nambiar. Kunjan Nambiar, maybe most of you will knowing, but for others I'm explaining. And he was an 18th century Malayalam poet who used fairly straight Malayalam, popularizing a new dance form called Tullal, as against the stylized Sanskrit in Kooth. He portrayed Nayars as impossibly scared warriors. Scared warriors. Imagining the fall of kings from throne, he could imagine even an army losing battles. The Tullal dances gave ample scope for absurd laughter. The laziness and lack of active ego is referred in some proverbs like growing banyan roots in the bumps, but the Nayar who relishes himself on the given seat. ആസനത്തിൽ ആല് മുളച്ചാൽ അതൊരു തണൽ എന്ന് കരുതുന്ന ഒരു വ്യക്തിത്വത്തെ കുറിച്ച്. It is all about such a self. In many ways, Surendra Nayar's cross references may remain personal, but not so specific. It is folk, it is proverbial, but unlimited caprice it has, with a range of materials, both ancient and modern, like strange flowers, fruits, face do's. He explains everything, strange flowers. He brings a lot of strange flowers. He brings the ritual materials. He paints the drapery. Such details don't go unnoticed. So there is a willing suspension of cultural or religious meaning on such indulgent pleasures of the self, or in these flat artistic details, wherein impossibilities and irreverence rules. So I know maybe one can also talk on this art is for long. I think I'm taking more time than it is given to me. So let me stop here, but let me show you some more images. Sorry, some more images of Surendran Nair's over. Look at the mask of a very strange, cunning, capricious mask, and the way the phallus is placed. The threads are intertwining on the body, and how it is hanging. The flowers are hanging. The hanging flowers giving a real erotic space. The sacred and the profane, the shoe and the kindi, the ritual vessel. The way the wings are tied to the body, and the wings are almost like properties of an actor at play. And look at the kind of cleaved vessel, ritual vessel. So, I mean, I had some more important points to discuss, which I'm restricting myself. So, what I was, planning to tell you is, performance is a kind of performativity is very much a part of contemporary art activities. And I showed you one important painter who literally used performance in a certain political way to show us, to project the invisible into a visible scenario. And I began this session with the two examples from a land art practitioner and conceptual, more of a conceptual artist, to show you other examples of performativity, bringing up dialogues of our own social common sense, bringing to dialogues of our own social common sense, and how it is breaking human limits and limits to think also. They were stretching the limits to think also. So this is what I have to tell you. Maybe more I'll explain in any question answer session. Hope all of you could hear me properly.
Thank you, Kavitha. And of course, you made very interesting observations, especially about the great tradition and history and politics of the invisibility behind all, visible art. So it is the time for discussion. I think, can you read? There is a question already in the chat box. Can you read it, or shall I read for you?
Let me try and find
Shivani Dubai. Could you explain it more in term? Explain it more. The term used here: bad behavior of singularities.
Yes. Bad Behavior of Singularities is the title by Surendran Nair. Yeah, it is a series title. Singularity is an experience of. It has wide range of meanings. Singularity, involves in. It is involved in individuality. Singularity is involved in any exclusive habits. Singularity is involved in any kind of exclusive racial xenophobia. Singularity is as opposed to any kind of plurality. So singularity is a bad behavior, and how it is bad, you can find it within the painting. That's what from explaining it from Surendran Nair's view. And what I was explaining all about him, his political context, and the same context in which we also share, singularity is definitely bad behavior. Sometimes we call it fascist, sometimes we call it majoritarianism, sometimes we call it exclusivity. And exclusivity is there in the very concept of art with capital A. And that is there within the institutionalization, very much used by institutions. So that is there within us. It is not outside of us. Singularity, the bad behavior of singularity is not something outside of us. It is there within us. So that is what we are performing and, performing and bringing out. And it is a cathartic process, definitely.
Again, Sita.
Dr. Sita has asked, ma'am, you talked about the ephemeral or transient way the artist indulges to create his or her works of art. If that is the case, how or in what way or form it is communicated to the audience? Yes, ephemerality, that is a truth that any artist, any thinker faces in life. One can only fake immortality. So we all know that. So immortality is something institutional. It is in place because institutional activities were in place. If they were not in place, it won't be there as an artistic value. So ephemeral is not a difficult concept because in the case of Andy Goldsworthy, what he does is whatever happens, he documents with photographs. He makes videos. So he definitely has a team of people. But the issue is, I told you, it is a very patient process. He has so many people to assist him, but many days nothing happens. Some days huge failures happen, and the failures are documented, and failures then won't be failures anymore. They will be transcending. So all these things are documented, and then these documents are for us to to explain these concepts, and that is given to us through institutions of art. So many museums, so many galleries are showing these, and that is why video is also one important medium for such artists who are daring enough to face such ephemerality of life, the mortality of life. Yeah, institutions are necessary for art, but as I told you in the beginning, their duty is not to create art, but only to locate art, to articulate such instances, explain the context, find out the context, and bring it into a sense of history of art, where art is not an exclusive singular habit. Art is, in all its plural terms, art can sustain. Oh yeah. So you are.
No.
Okay. Sure.
Dr. Sita, any response with that? Or anyone else? There is no question in the chat box. Is there any other questions?
I think questions will come later or maybe tomorrow.
Yeah, that happens,
Yeah.
So, shall we wind up here, Kavitha?
Yeah, it was a little long session. I'm sorry for that, but
Okay.
I had to take time. Otherwise,
No, it's
it
okay.
won't make any sense. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Sita.
Okay. So today, for formal vote of thanks, we have Atulya Manoj. She is just, passed from Indian Theatre Department, Chandigarh, right?
Yes.
Atulya, okay. Please.
Hello, ma'am. It was an amazing session, I must say, as you rightly called us, the winged human beings, right? It's an amazing way to look into art in a different form. Like we as theater practitioners, we have different ways of looking into art, but you gave a different dimension to it through your paintings and how you're inspired as an artist. Like we all are inspired as artists in one way or the other, but your inspiration really shows in the way in such a short span of time. I could see that you wanted to give us more and more, right? In this short span of time, and we also wanted to take a lot, but perhaps I must say that you have a lot of knowledge with such a short span of time. I am also thinking that we all are trying to take in that knowledge, take in that time to absorb whatever you gave us in this session. And also thanks a lot for having having shared so much with all of us today. Thank you so much, ma'am. And also thank you, I would like to thank Sunil sir and team School of Drama for having this beautiful session, which gave us a deep insight into art. And thanks a lot, everybody, for joining in.
Okay, so tomorrow is the last day, and we have the session of Maya Krishna Rao. So for today, good night to all. See you at exactly 7 o'clock, and we will have a valedictory function in the beginning. And then exactly by 7:30, we start the session of Maya Krishna Rao. Once again, good night, Kavitha. Good night, all the participants.
Yes, good night. Yeah.
Yeah, bye. Thank you. Thank you, Kavitha.